Okay, so remember that they're changing my voice. First, I'd like to point out that I've been researching the Bible for many, many, many years now, especially since maybe 2013, fairly intensely. In the last maybe 8 years or so, very, very intensely. The Bible basically tells you what you know already. If you're a person who analyzes things carefully, in a way that pisses you off in a complex way, in a way that's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. So to argue that one is the best at understanding the Bible and that magically makes them the best at understanding God is like saying that somebody who puts puzzle pieces together better than other people is the best at understanding God. It's even worse than that because it's made to give the Jewish people and white scholars in social clubs and secret societies the upper hand. You know, the scribes were in these secret societies, these cults, those cults that pointed right to scribes like Athena and Apollo and the cult of Imhotep of Egypt. Okay, so this is something when you put it in this context, you see clearly that it's there for that purpose. And so, I get fumed and harassed all the time because they want me to pretend that magically that these Jewish people who are not chosen are magically, supposedly chosen no matter what because of their flesh. And if you ask the Jewish people, especially you ask an LGBT person, you say, hey, you know what? You know, is salvation through you? They'll say, what the heck are you talking about? Right? Because they're LGBT, right? They aren't even believing in God. So salvation is not from the Jews. And we see in Matthew 21:43, it says the kingdom of heaven will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit. Now, a lot of the confusion comes here where we see that Jesus says to a Samaritan woman, I believe it was, he says that salvation is from the Jews. Now, what is he talking about? He's saying that in the story, remember, Jesus is a character in the story, that the Jewish people are the ones who are waking people's minds up to something. Okay, but remember, Moses learned the ways of the Egyptian people. We see that in Acts. He learned martial arts there. Okay, Abraham, it's even called Abraham, learned warfare in the greater Babylonian region, which Nimrod, who was the first mighty warrior, the first heroic warrior before the Lord, founded. And it is clear cut that it is actually an African, you know, martial spirit. And you might say, well, why didn't they kind of explain it more? Because if you rewind the clock, over 2,000 years, 2,500 years, and beyond, everyone in that region already knew that Africans were the most spiritual people. They were the mighty people of the region. They were well aware because of how people looked, because of how the trade routes went, because of the oral traditions that they had. They're well aware that the African martial art order were like the gods of the region, that Horus was the archetype of Pharaoh, and the Romans kind of stole this idea with their Hippocrates and their cults of Isis that were taking place in Rome, in Greece. These people were well aware of the mythology that connected white people to African people in a way that has to do with stealing women, in a way that has to do with stealing women and abusing them. You have the Greek mythologies and the Ethiopian queen and so on and so forth. Okay. So when we go into Revelation in this series about the misconceptions of Revelation, okay, I'm just going to kind of I'm just going to kind of follow my heart because I'm being fumed and poisoned and harassed. And I'm going to somewhat randomly, with the government interfering, mind you, trying to steal my credit, just going to kind of bring up things like the mountain and the hail and so on and so forth. And I'm going to kind of explain. Okay, so here we're going to kind of start off, with the trumpets. Okay, so the first trumpets, there's hail and fire, right, mixed with blood, and they're hurled to the earth. Okay, and it's on 1/3 of the vegetation, right, the grass, the trees, they burn up, right? So the tree of knowledge of good and evil, people don't quite understand what good and evil is anymore. Okay, they say the righteous thrive like a green leaf. Okay, so their righteousness is reduced, and it's also their ability to be worth something. And Revelation is basically a transformation. By the time it's done, okay, the psychology in the Babylonian culture that is the world system is going to be, is combating the nations and their identities, and the nations and their identities who are also in rebellion against God are combating that Babylonian system. It's kind of like splitting the Red Sea. Think about it as a sea of people where there's the red is symbolizes evil, and they're fighting with each other. Okay. So if you have any questions, put in the comments. I'm trying to keep this simple for you. There's a lot of complex ideas, and it takes a lot of thinking and connecting different scriptures. It was a real pain to do it, especially because I'm getting cyber attacked through websites, so I couldn't take any shortcuts. I couldn't look keywords up very effectively, and I couldn't go to websites that somewhat put it together already. So I did the long, kind of drawn out way, and it's very frustrating and very aggravating, and very, very disrespectful of people who aren't righteous to, kind of persecute me to try to cover this up. So we see in these, as the second trumpet is blown, okay, and the trumpet absolutely represents going to war, right? As we connect Habakkuk, we connect Jeremiah, we look at Isaiah, and we see the various references of trumpets. We see that it symbolizes, going to war. The trumpet is blown. God is marching in the storms. Okay, it's clear cut. Okay, so it's symbolizing something that is actually happening all at once, and it's a pain in the ass to explain why that is. But it basically says it. I believe in Habakkuk, it says that this stuff is going to occur all at once. Okay, but the trumpets are they're like different. If you were to blow a trumpet and say archers, get in a certain position, you blow another trumpet and say the cavalry charge, it's kind of like this, and you see that lightning is compared to arrows, and you see that there's horses in Revelation 6, and with the seals and so on and so forth. Okay, so the second trumpet is blown, and it says a mountain all ablaze is thrown into the sea in Revelation 8:8. Okay, so what is this mountain? It's interesting, right? The mountain is Babylon, but it's also the Jewish people's mountain as it pertains to earth. We see that in Galatians 4, right? The Mount Sinai and Mount Horeb and Mount Zion, as they are physical locations in this world, are cut off from God, and they weren't supposed to be cut off from God unless you broke the covenant. So they broke the covenant. So the mountain is thrown all ablaze. But what is being said here is that it is Babylon, which is referred to as a destroying mountain, that is all ablaze and thrown into the sea, which is being turned into a lake of fire. And we see in Isaiah 34, where it says chaos and a desolation are the new measuring line. The burning lake of sulfur is chaos and desolation, instead of Isaiah 28:17, where it says the measuring line of righteousness and justice for those who go into heaven, because the fruit of the righteous is the wisdom to get you to heaven. And we see that in Proverbs, and that is the measuring line of the spiritual location, if you will, of people going to heaven. So you see the mountain all of fire that's thrown into the sea is Babylon, the destroying mountain. It's in Jeremiah 51, especially verse 25, especially 25 to the end. It kind of explores that and does a good job for that. I recommend you read, all of Jeremiah 51. Okay. So I'm just going to end it there because I don't want to make these videos too long. I'm going to just take it one or two things at a time. So the hail and fire mixed with blood. Hail will sweep away your refuge to lie, right? It's the storm of the Lord. It's the martial arts spirit of the Lord. It's different components, different aspects, different angels and angles of spiritual warfare on the people that automatically occur. Like in Isaiah, wickedness burns like a fire. So the mountain automatically is turned to fire because the Jewish people accepted the Babylonian spirit, and they killed the prophets, and so did the Romans, and the Romans spread across the world, and with NATO and BRICS nations. Every nation in the world took on a kind of neo-Western system, which is a neo-Roman system, which is kind of neo-Judeo-Roman system, a neo-Babylon system in that sense. And if you have any questions about that, ask in the comments. Okay, so why the sea causes the mountain to turn into blood has to do with what Babylon did. Babylon took a lot of captives. They stole women, just like the Greeks in their mythology stole the Ethiopian women, Egyptian women, what have you. Okay, and obviously they raped them, and they forced them into marriages and so on and so forth, and forced them into their cultures, and forced them to give birth. And you see, periods have blood, females' periods, and the blood that was shed, and especially the blood that was shed by the righteous, trying to do God's work, refusing to assimilate. So their family members that they did assimilate, right? Look at white people and the Ethiopians, Jewish people, and all the people of the world, basically. But certainly these groups, which are the main focus of Revelation, we see that they are often mixed, in a very obvious way with Ethiopian and so on and so forth.